municipal finance and municipal redevelopment finance, and near the end, and in concert with Mike talking next, we'll talk in a little bit of detail about how we see the financing for this project taking place. So we'll start sort of at the highest level, right? What is a municipal bond? It is a debt instrument evidencing a local government's obligation to repay borrowed money. That borrowed money is borrowed at a fixed rate of interest. Municipalities in New Jersey cannot borrow at variable rates or with any sort of swaps or derivative type investments. It's all fixed rates of interest over a defined period of time. Bonds, as we hear later, are typically borrowed over a longer period of time, 10, 20, 30 years, whereas short-term obligations, notes, are issued for a shorter time period. Municipal bonds are fairly unique and known for their tax exemption. If you buy a bond, you get the principal at maturity, but you also collect interest. That interest is exempt from federal and state taxation. So as a result, an investor who's buying is willing to offer a lower rate of interest because in addition to the interest they're earning, they're also getting a tax exemption, which obviously has a value to them. That's one of the reasons municipal bonds tend to trade at a much lower interest rate than corporate bonds. The other is the safety and security. Municipal bonds, particularly in New Jersey, are typically and almost always secured by ad valorem taxes, unlimited taxing power of the municipality. They're basically akin to U.S. Treasuries in their safety and often trade right near, right off U.S. Treasuries. And as a result, again, as a very safe investment, interest rates are much lower on municipal bonds than they are on corporate bonds. That's, of course, by design, because then it allows local governments to finance capital projects, infrastructure at affordable rates, without being charged too much of interest. So what can we bond or finance here in New Jersey with municipal bonds? Capital improvements. Any capital improvement that has a useful life longer than 5 years. Roads, sewers, schools, infrastructure. And redevelopment projects, and certainly, physical bricks and mortar redevelopment projects like municipal buildings and salt sheds and things like that. The only thing you can't finance through bonds in New Jersey is current expenses. You can't sit there and just fund, half a year's worth of operating expenses, salaries, etc., through the issuance of debt in New Jersey. You can also issue refunding bonds. In fact, the township issued refunding bonds last year. Refunding bonds are basically issuing new bonds at a lower interest rate to pay off old bonds that were originally issued at a higher interest rate. It's not unlike refinancing your mortgage when interest rates have come down. Again, that was the case last year, and the township saw a good interest rate savings on an annual basis as a result of issuing refunding bonds. There are certain statutory provisions in place to protect municipalities from themselves. They are one of the reasons that New Jersey credits, municipal credits, notwithstanding the state, municipal credits do tend to trade very well in the marketplace as compared to some other states because there are a significant layer of protections. That includes a statutory debt limit. Municipalities cannot borrow more than 3.5% of their 3-year average equalized property valuation. You'll hear from Mike later where the township falls now very low, and where the township would be post taking on the project. New Jersey does have a state local finance board, a state oversight board. I believe we're only one of 2 states that have such an oversight board, and you can exceed your debt limit if you get the approval of the local finance board, which is not easy to do, but has happened from time to time. Certain items that are not included in that 3.5% debt limit for municipalities. The most common one is self-liquidating utilities. These are water utilities, sewer utilities, a public pool or beach utility, an enterprise that is paid for by users versus by the general tax base, and where the revenues from those users are sufficient to cover debt service plus all the operating expenses of the utility. I don't believe there's a utility like that here in Berkeley Heights, but I represent a town that has a beach utility. So basically, beach badges pay the cost to run all the expenses of the beach for a summer. It's a self-liquidating utility, and as a result, it's not included in your debt because you're not using taxes to pay for it. You're using a separate dedicated revenue source. So municipalities generally, as you all know, beginning of the year have to adopt a budget. And unlike a corporation or a private enterprise, the budget is not a planning tool or a guiding mechanism. It is a set-in-stone document that you have to live and spend within on an annual basis. One way to modify your budget post-adoption when you are doing a capital project is through the adoption of the bond ordinance. A bond ordinance amends the capital budget to include the project that is authorized in the bond ordinance. It creates an appropriation, an allowance to spend money, not unlike all your other line items in your budget are individual appropriations that allow you to spend that amount of money on that particular use. And that includes, again, any capital project and any other project that's authorized to be bonded under the local bond law, local development housing law, etc. Importantly, you cannot execute a contract or award a contract for a capital project without a valid appropriation, without a line item against which you can spend funds and pay out that contract. So when I said earlier, in order to get started, we need to figure out how to pay for this, it really starts with the bond ordinance, because the bond ordinance will give you the legal ability to spend money, it will give you the ability to borrow money, and it gives you the ability to enter into a contract or one or more contracts to pay for the project, knowing you have the funds available for it. It also authorizes the issuance of bonds and those short-term bond anticipation notes I mentioned earlier in order to fund the appropriation. It authorizes spending on the actual project itself, and it authorizes spending on soft costs, what we call Section 20 costs. These are your architect's fees, your engineering fees, your site work, your planning and design work, all of your legal fees, all of the costs that are considered capital and are allowed to be rolled into a capital financing because those services are directly related to the project. And this applies whether you are doing a bond ordinance as a municipality to repave roads, or whether you're doing a bond ordinance to undertake a project such as your redevelopment project. Once you have that valid appropriation against which you can enter into a contract, start to spend money, and you also have an authorization to borrow money, the question is, what can you borrow and how do you borrow it? And again, the bond ordinance authorizes two types of instruments: long-term bonds, which I'll get back to in a minute, and bond anticipation notes, which by their name are notes issued in anticipation of the issuance of bonds. They are short-term debt instruments. In New Jersey, they have to mature within 1 year of their issuance. They can be negotiated, sold at private sale essentially to an investment bank, or they can be sold at a competitive public sale on a date and time certain, based on an advertisement out to local banks and investment banks. They submit bids and you award to the lowest bidder. These notes can be rolled over year after year, but essentially after 10 years you have to either pay off the notes or convert them to long-term bonds. Now, you can convert to long-term bonds at any point along the way, after the first year you've issued a note, after the second year, up to and including the 10th year. But by statute, once you've had notes outstanding for 10 years, you do have to either pay them off or convert them to long-term debt. We see, generally speaking, three reasons notes get used and how notes get converted from short-term notes to long-term debt. The first, and probably the most relevant for this pending project, is flexibility and project cost certainty. Right? When you're undertaking a large project that's going to take a long period of time, you do not want to long-term finance a full amount of money, not knowing whether, until the project is nearly complete, what the total cost of the project is. So if you have, hypothetically, an estimate for a $10 million project, if you issue $10 million of tax-exempt bonds and you get the project completed after you take bids for $8 million, you've overissued by $2 million. That's a problem for two reasons. One, you're now paying interest on $2 million that you didn't need, and it is very difficult to just hand it back to bondholders and say, we didn't need this money in the first place, we're sorry. You have to wait 10 years in order to be able to do that typically. And two, the IRS doesn't like it. And remember that these bonds are tax exempt, which means the IRS is very much involved in monitoring your expenditures, and you are not allowed to over-issue tax-exempt debt. You're not allowed to issue more tax-exempt debt than you need to complete the project. In my example, over-issuing by $2 million, purchase over issuance. So in a longer term project, a project that may take multiple years, and a project of some size, you want the flexibility of staying in notes until you are near substantial completion and you know what more definitively what your project costs are going to be before you flip over and long-term finance. One of the other reasons municipalities use notes and convert at a certain time into bonds is their existing debt profile, right? Municipalities have existing debt out there already, you do too. In 3 years, your debt drops fairly significantly. So to the extent that you can be in short-term or interest-only debt for a couple of years, and then start to amortize principal and increase your debt payments on that note or bonds, when your existing debt has dropped down, then the net effect of that could be that your debt limit stays level, and there's no real impact, material impact to the budget on your debt service. And the third is a combination of when paydowns start and other projects. So as you see up here, notes are issued for as many as 10 years, but beginning in the third year, you do have to start making principal paydowns. So in my example, if I borrow $10 million, I can borrow that for 3 years, and I'm only paying interest. But beginning at the third anniversary, I do have to start making a principal paydown and starting to pay off some of that debt. So if I stayed out for 10 years, I would have 3 years of interest only, 7 years of paydown. In my $10 million example, I may be down to $9.5 million in debt at the end of the 10 years it's outstanding. You could then convert the $9.5 million into bonds. You only convert what's left in your principal amount of notes at that time. So many municipalities will either convert when those paydowns start in year 3, and or when they've accumulated enough capital projects of a certain size to be able to go issue bonds. You don't issue long-term bonds for $500,000. It's not worth it. There's no market for it. You're not going to get decent rates if you can find buyers at all. $2, $3, $4, $5 million, now it's worth having the discussion about a bond sale. So for a municipality that's doing $200,000 here, $500,000 there, it may take a year or 2 or 3 to come up with $3 or $4 or $5 million worth of projects. When you short-term finance those projects in notes, and then once you have enough projects that have been authorized and are in the ground and underway, you can accumulate them all and issue one series of bonds and pay off those notes. Because they are short-term debt obligations, 1 year or less, the risk is obviously very low to the investor. The benefit of notes also is that you have a much lower interest rate on notes than you do on longer-term bonds. And Mike and I collectively will get into that in a couple of minutes. In addition to issuing short-term bond anticipation notes, you also have the authorization under the bond ordinance to issue long-term bonds. Again, long-term bonds are typically issued for a period of 10 to 30 years. There are certainly examples otherwise. Redevelopment projects, you have the ability under the law to issue bonds for as many as 40 years. Practically speaking, in the marketplace, that's a little harder to do, but you do have the ability by law to do that. Bonds are typically sold at public sale in New Jersey, anything over $1 million, and only with a few exceptions. They're sold on a date and time certain. They're done online by competitive auction. There's one open auction system where it's not unlike watching, an eBay or a horse race where there's just consistent bids minute by minute by minute. And at the end of the expiration of the clock, the lowest bidder generally wins. You are required to award to the lowest bidder. I'm not sure in most circumstances why you wouldn't want to, or reject all bids and start over. When you issue long-term bonds, you do have maturity schedule parameters that are fairly stringent. This is another example where state law puts in place mechanisms that make New Jersey a little more favorable, because the state law requirements make you pay down your debt faster than you otherwise normally would have. Municipal bonds do not work like mortgages, where in the first year you're paying 99% of your payment as interest and 1% as principal, and by the end, 30 years later, it's reversed. In New Jersey, your highest maturity, your highest principal payment cannot be more than twice your lowest. So if your lowest principal payment in your 30-year of bonds is $200,000, your highest principal payment can't be more than $400,000. This essentially forces you to pay a lot more principal up front than you otherwise would have if you could pay $20,000 in year 1 and pay $1 million in year 30. You can't do that. So as a result of the compressed schedule, you pay off debt faster. Again, as I think I mentioned earlier, municipal bonds in New Jersey are sold at fixed interest rates. There are no variable rates, there are no swap rates, nothing like that. So on the date and time that you sell your bonds, you know exactly what your interest rates are for the next 20 years or whatever the terms of the bonds is. Those interest rates cannot change unless you issue refunding bonds. Go back to earlier, refunding bonds to lower that debt service, and you can only issue refunding bonds to lower debt service. But other than that scenario, your bonds are fixed at that rate of interest on the day you sell them. You know immediately what your debt service is in every single year for planning purposes for the next 20 years, 30 years, however long you've issued your bonds for. Municipal bonds do require a rating from one of the rating agencies. Moody's and Standard & Poor's are the two more popular for municipal bonds. Notes can have a rating in certain circumstances if there's a large enough size. Sometimes it's worth it. Other times it's not, and they're sold without a rating. And lastly, getting a little more into this project-specific financing, we would anticipate that this project is financed through a combination of bond anticipation notes, short-term notes, and long-term bonds. Again, it does a couple of things. One, it gives you flexibility in terms of when you want to issue your notes, how much you issue at an individual time period. It allows you to determine more definitively what the total cost of the project is, so you're only borrowing the amount of money you need and not an amount of money in excess. Staying in notes for a period would allow you to see how the second redevelopment project that was mentioned earlier plays out. Any income that comes in from that redevelopment project and is used to pay down debt on the bonds, you want that to be paid down on the notes and not on the bonds. So staying in notes would give you that additional flexibility of waiting to see how that developed while still getting your project completed and knowing that you have the ability to use those newfound proceeds to lower your long-term debt before you go and issue it. The amount of money that you authorize in a bond ordinance is not the amount you're necessarily going to borrow all at once, and certainly not in a project of this size and scope. So, you know, if this is a $25 million bond ordinance, for example, when you authorize a bond ordinance for $25 million, it does not mean you need to, nor will you borrow $25 million in notes all at once. What is far more likely is you will look at what your project timetable is and what the expenditures look like for the next 9 to 12 month period. Let's say that's $7 million. And you would borrow $7 million at that point because it's all you need for the next 9 to 12 month period. You're only paying interest on the amount you need. You're not, overly burdening your budget for debt service. And you would borrow the $7 million, you start paying interest short term. That $7 million would be out for 1 year. Let's say 6 months later, you're looking at your project schedule again, you're ahead of schedule, and you decide before that 1 year obligation is up, I need another $3 million to continue funding. 6 months later, you would borrow an additional $3 million in notes. You would have that $3 million note mature 6 months later on the same date as your original $7 million note, such that you are now combining them so that when you go to issue that second time, you are back from 2 notes to 1 note. You consolidate, and you can continue to do that on a every 6 month, every 4 month process, so that you are, again, only borrowing money when you need it, only paying interest on money when you need it, and at the same time, not spending more money than you need to on issuance of notes. And then again, at the appropriate time, you can figure out when and in what stages it makes sense to convert that short-term debt into long-term debt. And that would be done based on, again, project need, the progress of the related redevelopment project, interest rate environment, right? We and others will be monitoring short and long-term interest rates. And so if we see that there's a potential uptick somewhere and it might make sense to lock in $10 million in long-term debt and then leave the rest in short-term debt for 6 months or a year until the project is closer to completion. You know, those are the types of variables, in addition to the project schedule, staying on schedule and completing on time. Those are the types of variables that will go into sort of an ever-evolving analysis of notes versus bonds, how much and when, and those decisions, of course, would be made, you know, amongst the township administration, the council, and the professionals on the project side and on the finance side as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Good evening, everyone. So this is really a mirror image, if anyone was present for the presentation in 2015. It's essentially a mirror image of that presentation, just with updated information that we now know has changed. So the mandate was to update that 2015 estimate of the homeowner property tax impact based on the two scenarios we discussed at that time, which was construction of a new municipal complex here and the development of Hamilton Avenue, which was concept plan number 2, which was the plan Mike just discussed of approximately 100 townhomes. Scenario number 2 was, again, the construction of a new municipal complex on Park Avenue, but without consideration of the project at Hamilton Avenue. So the questions we asked at that time have not changed. And they are, will the township issue serial bonds or bond anticipation notes? What will be the life of these instruments? What are the estimated rates? And what is the estimated financial impact under those two scenarios? So as Matt just mentioned, we're certainly going to do a combination of bond anticipation notes, short-term financing followed by long-term financing. The duration that we had chosen in 2015 was notes for 7 years and bonds for 20. So that's the scenario we've maintained here. And what are the estimated interest rates? At the time, we were at about 0.65%, and bonds were at 3.75. Considering the way the market is today, short-term borrowing has actually gone up quite a bit. So we're now, the current rate would be closer to 0.95%. Bonds have maintained their stability. They're still selling currently actually closer to 3.25%. But to be safe, we're using 3.75. Then we go into scenario number 1, which is the municipal complex with townhouses at Hamilton. So we have to make some assumptions in order to calculate tax impact. So we know the cost of, and again, you'll see we rounded all the numbers just to make it easy. So the cost of a land purchase for Hamilton Avenue, it was $2.8 million and change. We just rounded that to $3 million. And then the estimated cost of the Park Avenue Municipal Complex, now that we know with the expanded square footage and inflation of costs of construction and whatnot over the last year or two, we're now at a number of $28 million. We're still at the same estimated sale price for Hamilton Avenue of $10 million, which gives us an estimated net project cost of $21 million. So as we discussed, the plan would be to do bond anticipation notes for 7 years At an interest rate of, that says 95%, should be 0.95%. And then the useful life, as Matt discussed, you can go up to 40 years, but we thought a reasonable assumption would be 30 years. And that's how you see that minimum down payment. That's how you calculate that minimum down payment, is you take the debt authorized divided by 2 times the useful life minus 1. That gives you your minimum down payment. As Matt mentioned, that's a requirement after year 3. So that's where the asterisk is. You can see we're actually paying down much faster than that. But, so we start out with minimal debt payments, and as we have other debt coming off the books, we step up our payments. So we start at $350,000 a year, up to $725,000, and up we go. You can see how the balance of debt starts to go down. And then after our notes, we move over to serial bonds. And again, so now we have a 20-year payback at an interest rate of 3.75. We had paid down through the bands, so we were down to $16,225,000. That's what we bonded for. And again, there's your debt service schedule. What does all that mean? Basically what it does, over the life of those instruments, it comes out to an estimated average increase of approximately $78 to the average household. So we use an average assessed value in the town, $308,100. Just so everyone's clear, that's assessed value, not fair market. So 308,100 would equal a fair market value of 550,179. And basically what that means is our ratio of assessed value to fair market value is 56%. So if you want to know what your assessed value is, you take your fair market value, 56% of that gets your assessed value, and then you can calculate your individual impact by multiplying that number by a factor of 0.00025. So we have a little example there for everyone. If you'll remember, the original estimate was about $70, so we're up $8 from 2015. So the next scenario is without Hamilton. So as you can see, without Hamilton, there's no need to purchase the property, so that cost is gone. We still have the cost of the building, which is $28 million, and we now have no sales proceeds. So we have an estimated net project cost of $28 million. Again, we're on the same 7-year issuance of bond anticipation notes. Now the project costs higher, we're starting at $28 million, assuming the same payback schedule. Again, we convert to bonds, and we do our 20-year payback. Now instead of 16,225, we're at 23,225. Same interest rate, 3.75%, and we pay that back over 20 years. And again, so now we have an estimated tax impact, which comes out to an approximate increase of $255 per average assessed value. And again, that's average assessed value, not fair market, so you'd have to do your fair market calculation, and then if you want to do it on your particular property, use a factor of 0.00083. So what does all that mean in the big picture? In the big picture, as Matt mentioned, we have statutory limits on the amount of debt we can take on as a township. The amount of debt permitted is 3.5% of our 3-year average equalized property valuation. That's a fancy way of saying every year, since we're at 56% and town B is at 83%, every year they come out with a table of aggregates that basically equals everybody out. Now everybody's at 100% of market value. We take the last 3 years of that, average that out, and 3.5% of that. Local Finance Board may approve exceeding this limit. We have no intention of exceeding, won't even come close. Our current debt ratio is 0.731%. If we were to issue the $31 million bond ordinance, you actually include the full $31 million as soon as you pass the ordinance. You don't wait until you borrow. So putting the full $31 million on the books would get us a debt ratio of 1.707%. Now, what are the big factors, the big variables? Obviously, Matt touched on a lot of them as far as the timing of when we issue notes, when we issue bonds, what dollar amounts those are issued for. So it's up to us to optimize those draws and manage that. In addition, obviously, from the slides, you can see the positives are the Hamilton Avenue project. So that obviously, sale of that property is a tremendous benefit and lowers the overall impact. In addition, should that project go through, there's also the possibility of a pilot at some point. And obviously those pilot payments could also be used to offset debt service, which could be another further reduction to the tax impact. And also the price per unit that we're anticipating right now could go up, could exceed the targets that we have right now. And that could also mean more money to us to offset the debt and a lower tax impact. And of course, we're trying to be conservative across the board, so our actual project costs could come in less than the 31 million. Potential negative variables that we have, which would cause prices to go up, are obviously the interest rates. So we've already seen that over the past year or two, short-term rates have gone up a little bit, gone up about 30 basis points on the notes. Bonds have stayed relatively flat, but that doesn't mean that they'll continue to. Obviously, without the Hamilton Avenue, prices went up dramatically, and conversely, we could also get a lower price per unit than we're anticipating now, which would be less of an offset. And then we could actually have project costs. We could have change orders or whatnot, some sort of catastrophic event that would cause actual project costs to exceed estimates. And that's basically it.
Okay, thank you, Michael. How I thought we'd work is, we'll work from my left, Mr. Robosto. Any comments or questions that you have of any of the four presenters?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, very, very clear, especially on the bond side, which I thought was interesting to the way you laid it out. Very clear. Just a couple of questions, maybe to Anthony and Michael collectively. I've seen many of your presentations, both live, on video, now from up here. So I appreciate all the effort that you guys have put into this. Anthony, I know your passion for libraries, which is appreciated here in town as well as we start this project, and your overall flexibility, I think, in terms of what has occurred with this project over the last couple of years. Can you just generally, with your experience so far with this process in Berkeley Heights, knowing that I'm sure you guys do this in quite a few towns throughout Jersey, what has your experience been with the process in terms of presentations, communication to the public? Is this the norm? Is this, just if you give us your general experience with your experience doing this with other towns in terms of how this has been communicated up to this point.
Sure, I think I expressed it in earlier meetings that Berkeley Heights is unique. It's tremendously open. We're to a point that it is somewhat frustrating but understandable that every move is open to the public, where every step in our development of both the site at both sites and the building itself has been put out there. But I would say too, for both the public and even the department heads that I met with, is that everybody's been focused on. You know, in the beginning, we had a lot of various input, but we were able to coalesce that to what it needed to be, and it's sticking right now, which is a good thing. What I said earlier about having a plan that is out there and is being digested, and I can tell you, as an architect, it's in my head, it stays in my head, and there are things that I can't wait to get in and improve upon, right? We should always keep trying to improve upon it, but as the town goes, it's remarkably open, and it is unique in my experience.
Thank you.
I would just add to that, I'll be honest with you, I love it. The level of detail over the years, I think has just improved the project. Having the input from the public, the town hall meetings, the Saturday workshops, I think we just keep getting a better project at the end of the day. I've made these presentations at, I'm not gonna name the municipality, but I've made, my partners have made these presentations sometimes for a new library, a new fire station, and we make our presentation, we're in and out in about 7 minutes. We open up the questions, maybe there's one question, and then we go and build the project. And you know, sometimes you're like, you know, you're like, where's, you know, you want that. And what I think is very unique, just to tag along what Anthony says, the involvement of the public and the passion that you have for this project, I think at the end of the day has resulted in a far superior project as each time we just keep refining it.
Thank you very much for your patience with the uniqueness of Berkeley Heights, and appreciate the efforts to date. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cotto? Questions, comments?
Just one short question on 10 Roosevelt property. How many units are going to be projected to go into this space?
100 units is projected, 80 market rate townhouses,
Right.
and there'll be 20 inclusionary affordable apartments.
And that's the little square you have at the end. It's going to be mixed throughout the entire complex.
I'm sorry?
Is that the little square at the corner, or is that going to be mixed throughout the entire complex?
You know what, we haven't really, it's,
No,
it will be located in this section of the development.
Makes sense.
And what we're gonna try and do is when we write that redevelopment plan, you want to include it into the project as you drive in through the project, as you live in that project, that you wouldn't even know the difference. The idea is, you're gonna have 80 market rate townhouses, but ideally you want the apartments, inclusionary apartments built with the same architectural design. You wouldn't even know the difference. Now, there may be stacked townhouses or so forth. You can accommodate it many different ways, but our objective is to make it as hard as possible for anybody to even know they're there. Integrate them into the project.
This way it blends right into the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
And flows right in. And by the way, I like the design. I've been through several places in New Jersey, and this is pretty close to something I've seen in Leavenworth Park, where you end up having the Central Park area for people to have a recreational area.
I think it lays out very, very well. I think we have a very favorable density. It's not overcrowded. We'll have a lot of green space in there. If you look at we always look at the back of the units. What is your unit back up to? That's always very important. Quite a few of these units, you know, pick a bad one, really. I mean, it's going to be hard. I think it lays out extremely well. I'm very excited about it. And again, going back, I don't want to revisit COA, but that was a very big win for this town because this could have turned ugly. I was very scared of it, but working with the group that we had and limiting it to that density allows for, I think, a very exciting plan.
I think it's a great job. Thank you.
Mr. Bullock?
Yes, question for Mike, Matt. So, with the bond anticipation notes, so obviously we'll have some of the fixed costs, starting with architectural fees, and then obviously once we start getting into construction, that's gonna be going on. Then we're gonna have the sale of the property. How many years, since some of that's kind of fluid in the calendar and timing everything, so how long would we, I know it's a crystal ball, but keeping the bond, anticipating those before switching them over to a pure, municipal bond? Or would we do possibly 2 municipal bonds, of course, once we hit that minimum point? What's kind of your thought process on?
My thought process would be it's gonna be a combination of We do get a lot lower rates with the notes, so money savings, cost savings is gonna be one part of it. Another part's gonna be the market itself. So if we feel that long-term rates at some point are very favorable and we wanna lock in, we can lock in a portion at that time. And the other would strictly be for flexibility. So as you said, the sale of Hamilton Avenue, perhaps, we would definitely wanna make sure we're still in notes at that point to directly offset our debt. So there's gonna be a lot of different factors. And as Matt said, that's something we'll constantly be watching to find out what's most favorable for us.
Now, for us to go from a note to an actual bond issuance, is that something that has to be brought back to the council, or is that a decision made by you, combination of both?
It's the CFO has the delegation to issue notes by the council in the bond ordinance, but the authorization to issue bonds would come back to the council by resolution to authorize the sale of those bonds, to set the par amount of the bonds that you're going to issue, to set the maturity schedule for the bonds, to set the date and time, and a whole host of other parameters of the sale of the bonds themselves. That all has to come back to you, the council, by resolution before a sale like that can move forward.
So just to clarify, it's a resolution, so if we're looking at that also when sales go through and reports come out that interest is be going up in the next 6 months, that in a 2-week period at minimum, we can then authorize the bond issuance.
Yes,
So it's
you
not an
can, yes, you
ordinance.
can convert fairly quickly. Quite frankly, the rating agency process will probably be the longest part of all of it. That's 2 to 3 weeks. And in the meantime, you would do the other actions sort of at the same time, right? We'd be before you with a resolution while we're preparing the offering document that goes out into the securities market, describing the sale, while the rating agency is having the interviews and going through their due diligence with the township and with its professionals. All of that would happen at the same time. So if there was a sense like that, you can get into the market fairly quickly.
Mike and Anthony, potential pitfalls, obstacles on the construction side. Obviously, we've done some very preliminary geotechnical. What are the things we're going to have to start to be concerned about as we get ready to put the proverbial shovel in the ground, in your opinion?
I mean, from a site perspective, I think we know as much as we're gonna know about what's in the ground. I think the concerns would be timing. We know, as Mike said earlier, that the DPW salt dome has to be relocated before we can put the shovel in the ground for the municipal building. And we need to get that work done, not in the winter, because it's full of salt. We need to get it done before the winter starts. So arguably, September, October, November at the latest, to have that building up and the other one down. Which means for this year coming, we really do need to get moving with the salt dome work. So from a concern point of view, I think it's purely timing right now.
From my point, 2 things jump out at me. One is maintaining the business operations of this entire site at the same time as building this project. Everybody knows what it's like to work on a construction site. If you've renovated your kitchen, if you've done put a deck, it gets dirty. It gets noisy, it gets busy. So, and it gets loud, and there's a lot of activity. So as a group, when we're doing this to, number one, save a tremendous amount of money. I mean, to relocate all the services on this property elsewhere and then bring everybody back 2 years later, it would be phenomenally expensive. So I think the plan that we have come up with, that Anthony has worked on and I've worked on, is an excellent plan. But the is, everybody's we're gonna be on a construction site for 2 years. And a lot of people, I can't say that enough, because construction, so I'm used to them, Anthony's used to them, but they're muddy, they're dirty, they're loud, they're busy, there's gonna be a lot of activity going on here. But we're doing it, I think it's very well planned out, and we're gonna have to work on commuter parking spaces, we're gonna have to do some juggling around here to keep operations moving and the cooperation of the public, everybody, to make this work. So that's probably, my big, not a concern, but just so that awareness of what we're gonna have to work with.
we were talking about the salt dome. Are we gonna actually build the foundation and all that for the salt dome first, and are we moving the salt dome, or are we building a new, totally new salt dome?
It'll be an entirely new salt dome, and on the plan, it's all the way on the left-hand western portion of our property. If you look on your aerial, on page 1, the exhibit 1, western portion of the property, it's over by the wooded area. There's an area that's cleared out, and it looks like sand, it almost looks like a beach from this aerial. That's exactly where the salt dome would go. The way our preliminary layouts have worked out, I can't promise this, but we're trying to do this without removing any existing vegetation. There's a cleared area out there. That cleared area just happens to go right up to the wetland buffer line. We can't go into those wetland buffers. We're gonna preserve that almost entirely, that wooded area. So it's gonna be tucked right up against the existing wooded area. Go back to the other question, one of my other concerns, Anthony mentioned it quickly, it's the perfect location for it on this site. It's where it's been designated in the redevelopment plan, phase 1 and so forth. But that area of soil is a little organic and soft. Whereas when we did our geotech report, we had very good soils throughout the site. We did 16 borings to varying depths. But in that little area, in that one particular area, there's gonna have to be some excavation before we get down to good material. So that's just, it's not a concern, it's just
What has to be done?
what has to be done. So I'm not alarmed by it, but it's just to bring your attention to it.
Okay. And then are we gonna have to move rec before we actually build the actual building?
Probably.
I'd like to get back to you with the definite on that too.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Ms. Kingsley?
I just have a question with the timeline, which I know we didn't really officially talk about, but this timeline really is only talking about this building. I assume at some point we're gonna make a bigger timeline that talks about the other pieces of this project, which is the library and Hamilton Avenue, putting all the things together, because this doesn't tackle that yet, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We'll be back when the Hamilton Avenue redevelopment plan will be presented this summer. And at that particular time, we'll get into we'll spend the entire evening. That redevelopment plan must be adopted by this council by October. So I would say at the end of the summer, we will be back and go into a lot of detail on Hamilton Avenue. Any questions that you have at that time. Again, we have that court mandated deadline to stay in the good graces. We have to do that. So we will spend an entire evening on Hamilton Avenue.
That's something we just integrate all of the moving parts of all the employees.
Station?
Yeah, I have a few. Both of you mentioned the flexibility of the facility and needing to have it. Obviously, this is a preliminary design at this point, but with the affordable housing, the projects we have coming online, have you designed into this a level of flexibility to increase different areas that might need additional services as the town grows? In other words, we have some room to grow into this, correct?
Yes, to a degree. You know, we're not designing a ton of empty space.
Correct.
But there is some flexibility throughout the building. In each department, there's a little bit of elbow room. Particularly in the lower level, we have more ample space. And, you know, the lower level is the size it is primarily because of the upper levels, right? So it's going to be cheap enough to build the basement full. So we have, for instance, more archive space than really what we need. And the expectation is over the years, the archives will decrease as the state allows you to digitize. So we think in the future there'll be some extra space as well.
But as we go to the next level of design, you're gonna meet with the department heads, and as part of that discussion, it's gonna need to focus on possible increase in community needs.
Right, we're basically double checking the program from the beginning to where we are now and again as we move forward.
Next, on the Hamilton property, we got a survey, we got the wetlands delineation, we got the floodplain line drawn, so we know exactly where the development constraint lines are, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so when you do this development yield, you're pretty confident that this can actually get built in the field?
Correct. We use real live, realistic sized units. We put in what we think is enough flexibility and green space. Again, this is my vision for this property based on this yield. I foresee that when this goes out to an RFP and RFQ process, again, this is something that we'll spend the night on when we talk about the Hamilton Avenue redevelopment plan, but the developer is not necessarily locked into this design. I mean, we're gonna try, what we're looking for is, all right, you get 80 market rate townhouses, this amount of square footage, 20 affordable apartments, what can you do? I mean, what I'm trying to do is I want to challenge the best and the brightest, most creative designers, architects, planners, engineers out there, and see, can they do better than this? Can be creative, let's see what they, it's gonna be their product. I've spoken to, I don't wanna say a dozen, but I've somewhere between 8 and 10 mid-scale, large-scale national builders on this particular site, and you would be surprised the different ideas that come out of people, and everybody has a different product that specializes, that they think is the best product on the site. So it's also in our best interest as a municipality, set the bar very high, but also allow creativity in their own vision and see what they can come up with, challenge them.
Right, so in other words, we put out the RFQ, RFP, come back with not only best aesthetic value and monetizing the property to the township's benefit, we get to evaluate all of that and make a overall value judgment as to the product.
Absolutely, that's the beauty of using redevelopment. We maintain complete control of the project all the way throughout. We can send it out through an RFP, RFQ process. They have to, one, have certain qualifications even to be considered for the project. Number two, they have to present elevations, layouts, details, design standards, and so forth, and see what type of product they're gonna put on here. We have the option at that time to throw them all out and start again. We have an option of shortlisting them and picking out the top 2 or 3 that are the best and say, all right, come back and do even better. So the beauty of using redevelopment is the flexibility remains and the control remains with the township throughout this process.
All right, and you mentioned speaking to, possible developers generically about the site and the project. We have some assumptions as it relates to what the sales proceeds would generate for the township. I mean, how confident are you in those numbers? And obviously, right now, the housing market's pretty strong. My concern would be, we don't move this thing along, you don't know what you don't know, right? So what could happen in the market?
Again, we started this so many years ago, that, it's been a while, but at the end of the day, before I released this again this evening, I went back and I looked at the numbers and how we calculated the range that I did 2 years ago, and presented it to the community. And at the end of the day, I'm confident in those numbers. I believe they're a little conservative, but I think it's my responsibility to your township is to have that little built-in conservative range put in there. The market has been very good over the last 3 years, 15, 16, going into 17. The private side of our businesses are doing very well right now. Nobody has a crystal ball what's going to happen. All of the other projects that we have folded into our fair share housing plan will not compete with this project. This is unique. The other ones are all apartments. Kings is going to be apartments. Movie theater is going to be apartments. Locust is age-restricted apartments. The Connell is going to be luxury apartments. So in our township, we don't have any competing project for this one. And that's one thing that I keep hearing about the developers, because statewide, countywide, all I'm doing, everybody's, in my field, all we're doing right now is high-density apartment complexes. Because we're doing co-op, we have a private side, we have a public side. It's all the same cookie-cutter development. My responsibility is not allow that cookie-cutter development to come into this town. When we do an apartment project like Kings or Locust, we want really beautiful projects. The unique, and I think what's the special nature of this project is it's a market rate family townhouse project, and you simply don't see very many of these. It goes back to what I said before, maintaining, the key of this whole thing was maintaining that density so that we could end the use. I was really afraid this was gonna turn into a 300-unit townhouse, apartment complex. So I think it's very unique. It's unique to our community. It's the only project that we have township-wide of this particular use. And I think all of those factors come into our favor.
You didn't mention this in your remarks, but I wanted to confirm it. This project in our affordable housing plan is only contingent on the township taking title to the real estate.
That is correct.
So, all right, and then from a point of just what this is gonna look like, it's something akin to what's at the Murray Hill train station. Higher end kind of product, not, smaller units, right?
That's correct. And again, we will dedicate one night just to the redevelopment plan on Hamilton. I'll be back here. We'll get into the elevation, size. I can have all the specific details, but I think it's best to reserve that for another night because that redevelopment plan will address all of those issues.
To the bonding team and the finance team. The bonds, when you mentioned the auction process, is that akin to a reverse auction where we set what the par amount is and then the interest rate is bid down? How does that work?
No, so you're gonna set, by resolution, as I mentioned earlier, you're gonna set the actual maturity schedule, similar to the schedules Mike showed earlier, right?
Right.
2018, this much matures, 2019, this much matures, et cetera. You're gonna set other parameters, and then the bidders are going to bid individual interest rates per maturity. One bidder takes all of the bonds, but they bid individual interest rates per maturity. They may bid a premium, right? They may give you cash in excess of the par amount of the bonds based on the interest rate that they're offering you. And long story short, the cash flows are discounted to present value. You get what is called a true interest cost percentage, 3.14%. And the bidder that bids the lowest true interest cost for the entire bond issue takes the entire bond issue.
For the bands, you said they're 1 year in duration.
Not more than 1 year.
Not more than 1 year in duration. So that means effectively you're just rolling them over period after period as you're gonna stay in bands?
Yeah, so in Mike's example where he said you're in bands for 7 years, again, get past the laddering concept I discussed earlier where you borrow $7 million at first, maybe $3 million. Once all of your money is borrowed, you would then have one note for, let's say, $20 million that would be issued for a year. When it comes due, you would pay interest, you would pay whatever your principal required or voluntary in excess pay down is, and then you would issue the balance for another year, and you would continue to roll those year after year until you made the decision to convert all or some of it into long-term bonds.
For our assumptions here, we've got bond rate of 3.75%. You do a lot of these. My sense is even that number today is a little bit conservative. Do you have an opinion?
I do, and it is. Thomson Reuters produces an MMD scale, a municipal market data scale, every single day. It basically is a table that shows by rating, classification, and by term of the bonds, 5, 10, 15, 20, et cetera, what the MMD rate is. A 20-year AA bond issue, the MMD rate is 3.18%. You are AA1, you are one notch above that AA. At the same time, municipal securities don't trade at the MMD level. They typically trade off of it or in addition to it. So even if you traded at 30 basis points above MMD, that's 3.18 plus 30 basis points or 3.48%. That is below the 375. The other scale I'll give you is the 25-year AA MMD. That would, although you're not going to issue bonds today, a 25-year bond today matures in 2042. Mike's maturity schedule showed you basically paying your last principal payment in 2042. Even that MMD scale was 3.25%. Again, if you trade 30 off MMD, you're at 355. You're still below your 375 that was shown in Mike's presentation.
All right, on your scenario, you had $78 for the new amount per taxpayer. Assuming we do Hamilton, it went up, I can't remember, about
About
$8, $9, if I remember. So the increase is attributable to the inflated costs, the delay in proceeding, as well as the increase in size of the project?
Yes, and we also went up from
30 basis
0.65
points, I
to
forgot.
0.95%, so you take into account those three increases, and that contributes to it.
Thanks.
Mike's scenario is also contemplating borrowing all the money at once,
Right.
which exactly what we
Right.
spent a little bit of time saying we wouldn't do.
Right.
So that obviously
Understood.
drives up debt service.
So it's as
in the number.
conservative as it can possibly be.
Yeah. Great presentation, guys, thank you.
I just have a couple here. Matt, you heard that Mike Strata discussing the issue of relocation and how it saved us a substantial amount of money. That cannot be bonded, am I correct when I say that? The costs that would have been incurred?
A cost savings? I mean,
In other
you-
words, had we have to move all these departments and pay rent at various locations instead of being able to build while we stay in here, is that bondable?
I mean, a relocation plan in connection with a redevelopment project
Right.
generally can be considered part of the project and can be financed, not in the typical local bond law context. But if you didn't do that, or you're getting savings as a result of not doing it, then that's, obviously you can't do that. But relocation is considered part of a redevelopment project.
And that would include no matter what department and where we move, et cetera, et cetera?
Right.
Okay. Now, in addition, let's take the Hamilton project, for example. The Hamilton project has a potential, if it goes through, to generate two forms of revenue. One would be the purchase, okay? And the second would be potentially a pilot if it was determined that a pilot is the way to go. Now, when, let's say it generates X from a standpoint of a sale, that X can be attributed directly to any debt we have?
Right, so the sales price, you could use the sales proceeds that you recognize to size down the amount of debt that you ultimately borrow, or if you've already borrowed it, to pay off X amount of the debt. So if you are in short-term notes, and in between when you issue it and the next year when it matures, you sell property and you recognize X dollars, when that note matures, you would use X dollars and pay off that portion of the note, never to be bonded again, or never to be borrowed again, bonded or issued in notes. And again, it's a reason to stay in notes, at least with respect to the amount you anticipate or may anticipate from that sale, because once you issue long-term bonds, you can't repay early for 10 years. And so it's an inefficient use of money to then invest it, because you won't invest it at a rate similar to the rate you're paying debt service on the bonds at.
And the pilot, if it was determined a pilot would be the way to go, that would generate X amount of dollars for a period of time. That could go towards a debt service?
That would go towards, annually come into the budget and could be used to pay debt service on the notes or on the bonds that you have an annual bill to pay, correct?
Okay, so the sale of the Hamilton issue, were to go through, has a benefit on two different levels there.
Right, for one, it will lower the amount of debt you either borrow or end up long-term borrowing, which means you're paying less interest because you're now borrowing less money. And two, then the debt service on that less money that you borrowed will be subsidized by virtue of the annual pilot payment that you receive.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Any of the four gentlemen? Okay, we're open to the public now. I would indicate this. If you have a statement to make, now is not the time to do it. You can make it at the public, the agenda, the public hearing portions, and so on and so forth. What I would ask you to do, if you have anything, if they are questions, I'd ask you to direct the questions to the mayor, to the council and myself, and then we will move forward with that. Again, questions, not statements. Thank you.
Okay, Johnson Caglia, 22 Robbins Avenue. You know, one thing that wasn't mentioned here, I'm curious about the impact, the new properties that are gonna be developed, Locust and so forth, they're gonna bring in tax revenue. Have we any estimation of how that's gonna, in terms of that $78, if we go with scenario 1, how that might impact on lowering that since we're gonna increase our tax base?
Michael?
That is not in.
No,
the
I know it's
scenarios.
not, yeah.
It would be, yeah, obviously, every dollar of assessed value you can add to the town is gonna reallocate those taxes, so that average home value, could change, in which, the more assessed, value you add, that $78 number would drop.
Yeah, no, I'm just curious, is there some kind of guesstimate you can, for example, let's take the Locust thing, okay, because that may be happening before other things. A guesstimate of what that might produce in terms of new tax revenue, or in terms of new tax base. I know in terms of school budgeting, we always were excited when we saw the ratables went up because it meant that it was a smaller share for the average homeowner. That would be the same thing here, correct?
Correct.
Is there a scenario or a model?
We didn't do
No,
that yet.
I
we're
get,
not-
I'm
we're
just
just
talking
not that far
ballpark,
yet.
obviously.
Yeah, we're just not that far.
Okay,
We were trying to keep it comparable to the numbers that people have seen, John, so we're not doing that because it makes it complicated. We were trying to stick to an apples-to-apples comparison
Well,
without.
We don't know
Right.
any of these projects,
Right.
if
Right.
there will be pilots, if there'll be
Right.
straight
We
taxes.
haven't done that, we haven't done
What
that.
the
And the other-
values are, we just don't know.
Yeah, the other thing we wanted to do was develop more of a worst-case scenario, and then these projects, these other ancillary projects would only serve to help.
So the 78 could get better.
Right,
okay.
and it will get better.
Yeah, so this is based on the current property values that exist as
Right,
of today.
it's what people saw to, you know.
The only
a year and a half
thing, the
ago.
only thing built in this assumption is the proceeds directly from Hamilton.
See, okay. With respect to the issuance of the long-term bond, what's the norm in terms of putting a call date so we might refinance them in 10 years and what's the earliest you can put a call date in?
So the typical call date for municipal bonds is 10 years,
Mhm.
and that's a par call. You don't pay a premium to call the bonds any earlier. You know, when we get closer, we can see whether the market would accept a 9-year, an 8-year, a 7-year call, which we have started to see recently. Of course, bondholders price bonds to the call date because they assume you're going to call them and they're never gonna get the longer term
Right.
interest. So basically, you pay for it, right? You could have a 5-year call, but your interest
Your
rate
interest
will
rate's gonna
likely
be
be
higher.
higher because you want the flexibility and they think they're not gonna get their investment past year 5. So 10-year par call is the standard. To deviate from that, a year or two would be something we could consider at the time, as long as, in my view, it's not something that's too expensive to pay for and is worth, you know, paying for.
Okay. Pilot money. I'm out of time. I'm out of time already?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I know where you're going, okay?
Now, I was just curious, can it only be used for the debt service?
No, no,
It can be used for
used for anything.
anything, okay.
One thing, John, and this is part of the 3 minutes, but people have to remember, the Hamilton property right now is not revenue producing. in this
Understood.
town. So once this goes through, that is a large revenue producing piece of property that heretofore.
Oh, yeah, that's
Right.
inherited in my first question, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Tom Chesky, 40 Rock Place. How many plans were presented to the council? Was this the only plan, or were there different levels of plans that were presented?
In terms of versions of the plan?
Yeah.
A dozen, I would say, at least. And early ones radically different.
Okay, and they were, what was it, they were based on needs, or how was that, or was there a budget given?
No, we never worked from a budget, we were working purely from the needs, right? We were charged to find what would be ideal for today and for the future. And we did that again, as I said earlier, by department, and using our experience with municipal buildings and buildings at large, and compose the concept with feedback, continued to adjust, but early versions were completely different.
But the different, what I'm getting at is the different price levels. Was there something that's like this one, which is the, whatever, $30 million version? Was there a $15 million version?
No, there wasn't, sorry.
Okay, that was it.
Because it
I
was.
only got 3 minutes here, so I gotta get to the rest of my things, but that was the answer to the question. Also, I noticed that on one of the documents, it had the sale of the Hamilton property for $6.5 million to 9.3. On your presentation, it's 10 million. I overrode the doc, and there was no supporting information on the 10 million. Is there supporting documentation on the 6.5 and 9.3? I'd just like a yes or no answer on it.
Whoa. To give you an answer, if he
Okay.
has to expand on it, he's
Yeah.
going to do that.
Yes, but it's
Okay.
I'm asking yes or no.
But you can ask a yes or no,
Okay.
but if he needs to expand on it, he's going to do it.
Okay.
Yes, I went through the variables at the presentation. I was at the high school at the time, and it was part of that original presentation.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a cost of the reverter clause, what the reverter clause would the value of that?
Tom, that wouldn't be, the individual to address there is not here tonight, if at all, and
Okay.
that would have been our
Okay.
appraiser, who has been here on prior occasions.
Okay, I'll ask that in a different one. Oh, and the presentation for the scenario one, that already, to my understanding, already includes the assumption of the pilot payments. Is that true or not true? So I tried to work through
No
them.
pilot payments, just the tax revenue from the completion of the Hamilton project.
Just the 10 million.
No, the sale of 10 million and then the tax revenue from the Hamilton project.
Oh, okay, tax not rather than pilot, it would be the tax revenue.
Ad valorem tax.
Okay, and also just, do you feel that we're in a bond? I know this is speculation, but is there a chance that we're in a bond bubble and these, I mean, you said there was a conservative for this 3.75. My understanding is that the bonds are at an all-time low because the United States is basically the only place in the world that's not going nuts. You have the problems in Europe and the problems in the Middle East, et cetera. So people are coming to the US, that's why our rates are low. Can you see those going up a lot past 3.75? You think that's 3.75 is an absolute tops this could be at in 8 years or 9 years, wherever we're talking about further?
No, I mean, my crystal ball maybe is as good as Mike's. I mean, I don't know where rates are going in 9 years. I will tell you that we have been in a near historic low interest rate environment for the better part of 15 years or more now. And for the last 5 years, people have said, long-term rates are going up. And for the next year or 2 or 3 or 4, I'm sure people will say that, and eventually somebody will be right. But for the last 5 or 6 years, they have not been correct. Rates have held, long-term rates in particular, have held pretty low.
Okay, that's all I got, thank you.
Tom Forger, 14 Dorset Road. When do you go to the local finance board for approval of the bonds?
As long as we're issuing them in accordance with a conforming with trading schedule, we don't have a requirement to go to the finance board. There are only certain scenarios where you have to go to the finance board to issue bonds, and we would not fall in one of them.
So you're not going to local finance board. Now, what makes this a redevelopment bond as opposed to a regular bond?
It's being authorized and adopted in connection with a redevelopment project, to aid a redevelopment entity in connection with a redevelopment project under Section 37 of the redevelopment law, which allows a municipality to authorize debt and issue bonds and notes to aid a redevelopment project.
Okay, and I think we were told that the pilot payments do not have to be dedicated to debt repayment, right? Okay, now I have some problems with the $78 number. As I look at scenario one, you're going to pay back about $22 million.
Is this a question or is this a statement, understanding you have problems with the number? If
I'm
you want to know
very-
how we got to the number, then you
Well,
need to talk
I
to
have-
the people that came up with the number.
If you just allow me a little latitude, Counselor, I'll get through it. The $22 million involves, or be paying back about $22 million in scenario one. So about 16.5 million of that is on the homeowners, because 75% of your assessed value is from homeowners. That comes out to $3,734 per homeowner over 20 years, which is $186 a year. So I don't even get close to the $78. So I'm trying to understand how you got 78.
So your question then
Yeah.
should be directed to the individual who came up with the $78. That is my point.
Right.
Okay. Michael?
I'd be happy to supply with the spreadsheets, but I mean, that's not even close to how you allocate taxes, so.
I'm sorry.
That's not even remotely how we allocate taxes. We allocate
Okay.
taxes based on assessed values, based on its average assessed value.
I'm
I can give
using
you
your
spreadsheets
figures.
if you'd like them, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, but I'm using your figures. You have to pay back 16.5 million.
He said he'd provide the back of the
Right.
spreadsheets.
He said he provided to you.
All right, I think it's a bogus number, that's all.
Okay, that's a statement, but that's okay.
Right. Well,
All right.
we're allowed to make
Go
a
ahead.
few
Go ahead.
statements, right? I mean, you had like hours and hours from them. Let me just see if there's anything else. The 6.5 to 9.3 million, so that is the right number according to Mr. Mistretta, but Mr. Marceau uses 10 million. So what should we use for the evaluation of the impact?
Mr. Mistretta?
I'm comfortable with the range that I've provided. It's the same range
Yeah.
that I presented 2 years ago, the 6.5 to 9.3.
Okay.
That's the same range that I provided to the community 2 years ago.
Okay, so why is our CFO using a different number then?
We've been over this before, but basically Mike has one estimate and our valuation firm, Value Research Group, has a different number. So what we did was we took the average of those two. That information was also provided at the high school and also in the previous presentation. I'd be happy to give you those figures as well.
The issue there, Tom, is assuming 80 market units,
Mhm.
the question is what's each door worth? There have been some individuals who have opined that those doors could be worth as much as $150,000. In other words, if a house sells for 800, it would be worth 150 from a purchase price to us. You do the math, you get 12, okay, on that. If you are conservative and you put it at $1.25, well, then the arithmetic is what the arithmetic is. And that's how that can be.
Okay, so you said an average. Did you use the 9.5 from Mr. Mistretta, or the 9.3 or the 6.5?
Again, I'll provide the spreadsheets, but it's an average between Mr. Mistretta's and Mr. Beiser's.
Okay. All right, thank you. I reserve the balance of my time.
We're over your
You're
time.
over your time.
So we'll subtract from that.
Subtract it, you're well over 3 minutes.
You don't want to go there.
I could do as they do in the house.
Go ahead.
I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Can't yield what you don't have. Okay.
Hi, Sai Bhargavi Akiri, 146 Robbins. I just have a quick question for this new project. Are we going to get any additional services than what we get right now?
For the
For the
new municipal building?
yeah.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get a lot of, new services. Do you wanna go through it, or,
Sure, yeah.
you know?
Yes, the building has obviously a number of different departments. I don't know how familiar you are with the plan, but each of the facilities, such as the library, will have more flexibility, more meeting space. The administration, the council chambers, the various public meetings will have more space. Their workspaces would be better for better services. The recreation with the community center spaces are obviously spaces you don't have now, aside from the former garages, which are now community spaces next door here. So those are improving greatly. The police department is improving greatly. And overall, the building is serving the community at large, right? So the town really has this meeting space and the basement of the library. We'll have much more flexibility
So
for,
how many more additional spaces are we adding?
oh gosh, we have,
So compare, like, basically, do you have something which says this is the current and this is the to be, this is as is, this is future? What's the percentage of space that we are going through?
No, we don't have a graphic side by side of each of these various departments and where they're located or around.
Okay.
But as an example.
Could we get that, like, just from a, like, just like how we've got the pictures,
Right.
they're very clear, so
Mhm.
so currently as is, this is the square footage that is available to the town residents versus we spend 31 million,
Yeah.
you get 20% more, 40% more.
I'm sure we can do a description of that. I don't know about spending time to do floor plans of the existing.
No, not
buildings.
floor plans, like
Right.
basically this is the as is and this
Sure.
is the two.
Sure. I think the key attributes could, you know, in terms of a comparison from existing to proposed could be done.
So basically we're talking just space, increased space for money.
But the space gets the services, right?
Yeah, I don't-
It's not just increased space, you're in a, we have a building that's almost falling down, that's not even compliant, if you
So
walk
that
there.
leads to my next question. So what were the safety code violations that we have with the
Oh,
current
there's-
regulation?
This has been
This
gone
has
over
been gone over for
in
multiple.
numerous meetings.
So I'm new to the town and I still,
I
I'm,
appreciate that, okay, but at this point in time, we would just ask you to
so
There's
you won't
copies,
answer
there's,
my
no,
Ask
there's
questions
documents that you can
of
get.
the people that are
Yeah.
here tonight.
No, I
Not that we
got
wanna
to
avoid
look
that.
at the document.
You can get the
No,
document.
I looked at the document, so I didn't see any safety code violations that this building failed.
Well,
So-
they do exist, and what I would ask, Anna, do we have the documents that reflect the references that were made by our architect, and I know Mr. Roundenthal did it,
Right.
also when he was working with you. It's in the report, so we can make that available to you.
So the Oprah documents that we saw, that did not show any safety.
I don't know what you saw, I'm just saying that.
No, but you don't know
What
to
you're asking.
answer, like, just in like a minute, what were the safety code
No,
violations?
that's not what we're trying to do tonight, and please be patient with us. We're just trying to address whatever the concerns of the individuals are with the 4 people that are here.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And, oh, so when can we see the new comparison, like the as-is and 2D? What's the timeline that we're
Do
looking
you know
at?
what, do you know what's currently here in terms of, have you been to the police department, for instance?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so you realize that there's trailers, correct? In
Yeah,
terms of-
no, I'm asking for
Right,
just
so-
a
so
percentage
one-
of what we are
right,
getting.
So
yeah.
one thing would be, for instance, the current police department, which is beneath the town, quite honestly, versus the new police department. Have you been to the rec center where my son plays ping pong?
Why is this an attack?
No, but basically, it's, instead of interrogating me, I'm just asking, if there are people here and if you're paying money to give us this presentation, I'm just asking, when can we get that? They said, yes, they can do something, I'm just asking for a timeline. Simple, I'm not asking to be
Well, we didn't,
interrogated.
my question, I guess, was I wasn't sure, you said you were new in town, so I
I,
didn't know if you had
well,
been
when
to
I
the
say I'm
library.
new, so relatively new, 3 to 4 years new, so I've been here.
Anthony, how can you reasonably turn that around? 2 weeks,
In
week?
a few weeks, yeah, we can put a general description together.
Yeah, but rec department consists of the house and the garage versus the space here, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just my availability right now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you. Okay. Let's move to the Township Council reports. Basso.
Thanks, gentlemen. Mike, you might want to just stay for focus.
Also, anything you want to report?
I just wanted to mention, it was great to attend the firemen's inauguration dinner the other night. Again, seeing these amazing volunteers continue to be passionate about protecting the town. It was really great to be there. And just to mention as well, I think this was brought up a couple of weeks ago when the menorah lighting happened. I thought it was just interesting to see, again, the tradition of the town, and I think Charlie had mentioned a couple of weeks back, just in terms of the various components of town, the fireworks, now this winter walk. And what you're seeing again, I think, was a nice example of the town changing and growing with what? A new tradition in some capacity that's now part of the season in town, which I thought was really great for Herman Mathis, was one of the gentlemen that was behind this, working closely with the rec department to make that happen. So it was really great to see, and just again, nice to see new traditions being built upon old traditions here in Berkeley Heights, which is in a lot of ways the basis of the town. So we're growing upon those traditions with new traditions that we hope to continue to see going. So I thought it was a really positive thing, just generally in town. So
Thank you, Peter. Manny?
Nothing.
Michael? Nothing. Greg? Jean?
Nothing to report.
Mark? Nothing. John Paciccolo?
I'm not gonna say nothing.
No. Okay.
All right, from our DPW, leaf and brush crews will be doing a final check of all sections. Crews were held up due to the snow and sewer main force that we had to repair. In light of that, I think I brought you up to speed last time that we had hit a gas line. I got some pictures I would like to show everyone, and the audience is welcome also when you guys are done to take a look. The first picture I'd like to show you is the marking of where PSEG told us the gas line was, and here's where the gas line actually was. You'll notice two things. The marking is not where the gas line was, and the gas line is actually crosses over, you'll see in another picture, on top of our main, which shouldn't have been done. What we found out was the marking that they put on the gas line was an abandoned gas line. So they marked the wrong one, okay? So now we're forced to dig by hand. So as you can see in this picture, that shows the gas line crossing the main, which shouldn't be. When we got down to the bottom, and Craig, you'll probably, Councilman Pastor, I apologize, you'll appreciate this. You normally back up a 90 on a cast iron pipe so that if it shifts, you got something behind it. When the contractor put it in, he dumped 2 wheelbarrows of cement from the top of the pit on top of the line. Now we had to chisel the concrete off of the line by hand. When we got the pipe cleaned off, again, Craig, I think you will know, cast iron generally breaks circumferential. This one not only broke that way, but as you can see, there's a longitudinal split along the pipe. What caused that? It was very interesting. We had 3 or 4 of the neighbors come out and said that since the quarry had changed where they were blasting, they've had cracks in the walls and things falling off the shelf. Can't prove it had anything to do with it. Might have just been coincidence. But we ended up with 2 breaks in the line. Here's what the repair looked like when it was done. We had to put a stainless steel sleeve around to join the pipe together. And that was the finished product. At the end of the day, I checked with both Tom and Joe Miosi and said, if we were to do it again, what's your opinion? Both of them said that the guys did a good job, they stuck with it. We would certainly have our people do it again in-house rather than going outside. And again, I contend the contractor would have hit that same gas line. So,
Do we have any recourse against, or markout for?
I'm sure not, but I'm not expecting a bill either.
But to recover our guys' time and,
I think we'd probably have a hard time arguing that one. I'd probably defer to our, because I think what they're gonna tell us is that the marking is not dead on, it's within a range. And I'm sure it covers where the pipe was.
Yeah, we'd have to look into
horseshoes and hand grenades to mark out?
Exactly.
We'd have to look into see what kind of the discrepancies they get in the dig laws as to how much of leeway they have on each side. 'Cause if it's outside that, then we would have
What about the fact that it went over our line?
Again, I defer to Joe. I don't know if we could do anything about that or not. Tom? I'm getting a nod from, a negative nod from Mr. McAndrew.
Mr. Sickler, with the blasting, if that's a,
Underground, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I'm sorry. Underground is fair game. If there's certain laws as far as potable water and wastewater, as far as the distance within the pipes, but as far as vertically, if we're underneath them, you know, and I think you'll find that the markings that they had were about 2 or 2.5 feet off, and I think the law is like 5 feet either side of the mark, so that.
Hand grenades, and horseshoes.
So, you know, Mr. Fasher had that about right.
Yeah.
but if we think the blasting,
You can't prove it though, Mike. Even if I took that pipe out and sent it to a lab.
no, but if we think there's a potential, do we want to get from them when they're blasting to do some
Three different residents came out at different times, not all in one group, one at a time. And spoke of damage within the house, things physically falling off shelves.
Well, and the other thing too, you have to remember is now what we've done is we've installed it properly. We've got the backup block built behind the 90, where before it was not done properly. So even if we do get some vibration, we're hoping that's gonna take care of that part. All flags and banners are taken down from the holiday. We had a snowstorm on January 6th, and 3 to 4 inches throughout the town over a 10-hour period. It really turned out to be more of a project because it fell slow and it was over a long period of time. We ended up salting over and over again. All the streets were cleared with plows. The sidewalks, I want to show you our other piece of equipment that we got this year. This is our lawnmower, the riding mower that we can convert, that's closed in and it's got the plow on it. We were able to, normally what happens is, it takes 4 men 6 hours to shovel all the sidewalks and the paths. We used 2 men, let me just get this straight, 2 men, 2 hours in order to do everything this time by having that piece of equipment. So it really helped us. What that does, we don't have to pull people in off the road then to start hand shoveling. So it really did help us out. We also replaced 3 street signs the past couple weeks. I want to give you a new feature this month. And we are going to do a better job on it. I had this idea and I asked Joe to give me some details. We're going to break this down on next month into some better categories. I call this our maintenance down at the DPW yard. What have we done as far as repairing vehicles? We had 20 repairs, and again, we're going to get this broken down to the oil changes, brake shoes replaced, tune-ups, that type of thing. But just so you know that our mechanics are working full-time, we had 7 of our DPW vehicles had to be repaired, 1 engineering, 3 out of the Board of Ed. We had 2 buses we repaired for the Board of Ed, 3 from rec, 5 police vehicles, and 1 fire vehicle in the past couple weeks. So our guys are hopping on